Hey, it's Nick Thompson. I'm CEO of The Atlantic, and this is The Most Interesting Thing in AI, a podcast produced by Rethink, The Atlantic's creative marketing studio, in collaboration with PwC, a leader in helping organizations use AI. In each episode, we're exploring how artificial intelligence is reshaping our lives. Today, I actually have two guests. The first is Diogo Rau. He's the Chief Information and Digital Officer at Eli Lilly and Company. He's had a long career in tech. The most recent chapter has been helping to bring the pharmaceutical industry into the AI age. So I wanted to ask him about the ways that AI is changing his company, not just in paperwork, workflow, but most importantly, drug discovery. How is AI making it easier and faster to find life-saving drugs? What impact does that have on the rest of us? And also importantly, where does it actually not make a difference? After that, I speak with Dan Priest, PwC's Chief AI Officer. We're going to talk about some of the larger trends he's seen across healthcare. But first, here's my conversation with Diogo. Diogo Rau, thanks so much for being here.
Thanks for having me, Nick.
And the funny thing about this to the listeners is that Diogo and I spent all this time together in college, lost touch. And then when I was preparing for this podcast, I said, wait, Diogo Rau, that sounds familiar. I'm going to read you something. I'm going to ask you if you could help me understand it, okay?
All right.
So this is an email from Nick Thompson, nickT@pangea.stanford.edu, to Diogo Rau, Friday, May 23rd, 1997. Subject, R.E. beer. Diogo, what time is it going to start? I'm writing a paper, but a little beer couldn't hurt. Nick, I have no idea what we were talking about. What is the context, and why was I writing you on a Friday night at 9 o'clock asking when something was going to start? I should add, by the way, that I was 21 years old when I sent that note.
Definitely 21 years old. Yes. No, I think we were having a lot of fun. And I do remember you and I had crossed paths in the Senate at Stanford. Who knew that so many years later we would come together and meet again? I think what happened was I got a keg of beer and I brought it into the Senate. And it was probably one of the most productive Senate meetings that we ever had. And you know what? I have a little bit of revenge for you, because actually in my hands right here is an email from Wednesday, May 14th at 12:36 p.m., 1997, just over 28 years ago. And it is from the same Nick T at pangea.stanford.edu. The message is titled Music. And it begins with friends, comrades, and fireflies. I just made a new CD of my finger-style acoustic guitar music. It will be played Thursday at 10 p.m. on KZSU. If you listen and dub it, you won't have to buy it. Then you can donate all the money you save to support fringe social and political movements. That was awesome. And you know what, Nick? I am pretty sure I bought your CD, because years later we were clearing out old CDs and my wife said, "What is this? I've never heard of this guy." And I was like, "Oh yeah, it was a friend of mine from Stanford." Do you remember what your CD was titled?
Sometimes Splatter Paints.
Yes, and that was such a clever name for an album. I love that. Sometimes Splatter Paints. But the best part for me was how far ahead of your time you were, because this is back in 1997. At the bottom of the email, you have a disclaimer because you sent this to a distribution list. And you said, if you're wondering how you got this message, it's because you made at least one of the following mistakes. And you list 6 ways you could have gotten on the distribution list, including living in your dorm, signing up for the email list at a concert. But my favorite was reason number 6, which was being someone I've had a crush on since the beginning of freshman year, but have never once talked to.
I can't believe you have that email.
I know. Back in the days when we kept Byzantine folder structures, you were categorized in my friends folder. We were indeed friends back at the time, or at least I thought so.
This is awesome. I consider you a friend back then, even though we forgot about each other for 30 years. Tell me a little bit about what you did after you graduated. You graduated the CS degree. What happened next?
Well, then I stayed and I got my master's in industrial engineering and engineering management, because back in 1997, computer science was not the most popular major. Things have changed quite a bit. And I decided that I wanted to spend a little bit of time doing management consulting. But then the dot-com boom happened and I said, hey, actually what I want to do is get back into tech. And that fun ride of the dot-com era, I ended up starting a company and got together a few of my friends from Stanford. And we just had some of the best time of my entire life. And so after the dot-com boom and bust, then I ended up going back into management consulting, and I worked my way up the ranks over at McKinsey, became a partner doing a lot of stuff in technology. And then one day, Apple called and said, hey, do you want to run engineering for retail at Apple? Did that for about 10 years. And then one day I got a call from Lilly, which said, hey, do you want to come over into life sciences? It's a space that I knew absolutely nothing about. I didn't take a single class in biology or chemistry when I was at Stanford, so I was completely unqualified for the role. I had no biology background, just the technology side, but they didn't take no for an answer in terms of my lack of qualifications on the life sciences side, and I've just had an absolute blast ever since.
You go from helping run Apple's retail stores to doing drug discovery, which is a pretty big shift. Was there anything that the two things have in common?
The big thing that both have in common are where the companies are at that point in time. So I joined Apple in 2011, and I joined Lilly in 2021. And in both of those times, it was an incredible time of growth. The 2010s were a huge period for Apple. That was really the decade of Apple. And what we're seeing now in the 2020s is what's happening with medicine, where you've got breakthrough after breakthrough. It feels very similar, even though those are two completely different worlds. You can see just how much progress. And the other thing that's really in common between the two is just the focus on the end user. In the case of Apple, that's the consumer, and in the case of Lilly, that's the patient. Mm-hmm. There's a lot in common between two organizations that are very values-driven, that are thinking about the people that are using their products.
And so you go into this organization that has certain similarities, particularly in values, and then this other thing happens, which is AI becomes massive, right, after you join. So tell me a little bit about how at Lilly you've watched and observed the changes and improvements in AI over the last 4 years.
If you go all the way back to December of 2022, when ChatGPT came on the scene, it was a crazy time. I remember seeing ChatGPT for the first time and interacting with it and having the same reaction that I did when I was back at Stanford and I saw the very first web browser. Yeah. And you didn't know what the future was going to hold, but you knew it was going to be big and that life was never going to be the same again. You also knew that both the web browser and with ChatGPT that you couldn't just tell somebody about it. The only way to really understand the importance of this phenomenon is to try it yourself. So I went on a mission after that to try to show everybody I could what ChatGPT was doing. So the very first executive committee meeting we had at Lilly right after the break in January of 2023, I showed our whole executive committee what ChatGPT was. We had just spent several hours of strategy planning about what we should be doing, and then I put into ChatGPT the exact same questions that we were considering. And ChatGPT came up with an answer that was amazing and was remarkably similar to what we had just spent 4 hours doing. So as I'm up there talking, my phone starts buzzing, and I realize it's actually our general counsel messaging me during the meeting that she's watching as I'm doing ChatGPT, and she says, I've got a town hall on Thursday. Please come to it. What happened next is, I think, a big factor in why we took such an AI-forward approach at Lilly. I had a room full of hundreds of attorneys, and in this town hall presentation, what we talked about was not the risks of AI, but instead, I asked AI the questions like, generate a patent for one of our medicines. Mm-hmm. I asked it to draw up a contract for non-competes. And I looked out in the audience and I could just see the attorneys' faces as they just lit up and they saw the opportunity that it would be for making their lives easier. And from there, with my partner as general counsel, my boss, our CEO, and other members of the executive committee, we really went on a mission to try to get everybody to use generative AI. So back then in January 2023, February 2023, companies were going the other direction. You might remember everybody was locking things down. Companies were saying, don't use ChatGPT, you can't use it for work. We were doing the exact opposite. We were literally telling everybody, you need to get on this, you need to use it. Now, of course, don't put anything in there that you wouldn't put into a search engine, but you need to be using this tool.
And why was it that the reaction at Lilly, particularly among the lawyers, was one of enthusiasm, not fear and rejection, which is the reaction that so many people in so many places had?
I think it's all about being able to see it useful for yourself and your day-to-day job.
Yeah.
I really think that other companies would have had the same reaction we did if their attorneys had seen it not as a risk, but hey, this is a way that we can do our jobs better. But it wasn't just our attorneys, of course. It was every role that we have at Lilly. Everyone all around us saw opportunities in what they could do. And I think that we have a very forward-thinking executive committee. And so we're really not thinking about just today. We're thinking about the future. And I think we really want everybody to be thinking a few years out. That kind of encouragement that it's okay to try out a new technology, I think, was really a big part of why we turned out differently from other companies.
That's a remarkable moment. What is the most useful thing in the core work of scientific research where AI comes into play?
Before we get into the research part, we do actually make a lot of documents. When we submit a new medicine for approval, we used to have send-off parties for the semi that would drive off to Washington, D.C., an entire semi just filled with paper documents to take to the FDA.
Seriously?
Seriously. And I've always wondered, what would happen if there were an accident along the way? I mean, did we really have a backup? Would you have to reprint everything? And so there is a lot of document generation. So there's a lot of opportunity for AI in the process of clinical trials, which I think is one of the ways to make things more efficient.
And actually, there's another advantage there, right, where you have all of this proprietary data that you can feed into your AI.
That's exactly right. And so you've got tons and tons of clinical trial data. And that's some of the most exciting parts of it because there are always all kinds of gems inside the clinical trial data itself. And being able to have something like a large language model that's able to take all of that data in and understand it and see connections that might be too hard for a human to ever see across a semi-container load of paper documents is phenomenal.
Do you also use AI for novel discoveries or helping you think through the most promising paths for novel discoveries?
Absolutely. Discovery is one of the places where I'm the most excited. There are several different kinds of medicines, and each links up with a different kind of AI. So bear with me for just one moment, but I'm going to break up the world of medicines into three different kinds. Okay. Genetic medicines, large molecules, and small molecules. So genetic medicines are things like gene therapy and gene editing, where you might go in and add in a missing gene, or you might correct a typo in a gene. You have large molecules that are so big they have to be injected, or they come in an injectable form like the COVID vaccine. Those are proteins and antibodies. Yep. And then you have small molecules, which are usually like oral medicines. Those are the ones that you take in a pill form. They're small enough that you can write them down as a chemical formula, whereas a protein is so large that at least as a human, you don't write down a chemical formula for it. You might describe it in other ways. Genetic medicines are really cool in terms of AI because they have letters. You might have heard the 4 letters of DNA and RNA. You put a few of these letters together and you have a word. You put a few of these words together and now you have a concept like a protein that you want to make. But it's so rich that you even have things like punctuation marks in DNA and RNA. And so when you start thinking about DNA and RNA not as chemicals, but as letters and words with punctuation marks, it starts sounding a lot like what goes into a large language model. So maybe you can go through and say, hey, summarize this DNA for me. Or maybe you can say, proofread it for me and tell me where there are errors. So that's why it's super cool for genetic medicine.
So you're coming up with a proposed edit for a gene, and you're saying, hey, what if we CRISPR this in, or what if we modify this gene in this way? You then would take what you're proposing, feed it into some kind of large language model, and then have it tell you, this seems like a good idea, or you may have an error here, or suggest another change?
That's where it could head. Right now, it's all still very early days, but very much the same kinds of models that we use, transformer models and other things, can apply to DNA and to RNA. So that's one of the biggest areas that we invest in. In fact, at Lilly, well over a quarter of our research right now is in genetic medicine, even though that's not anywhere close to where our revenues are today.
Wow. So obviously with AI, there's a problem of hallucinations, particularly when you use transformer-based AI. And so it's just really helping you brainstorm, edit, and then there's still elaborate testing before you determine whether a therapy is effective and appropriate. It's helping with one crucial step. Is that the right way to look at it?
Correct. It's just one crucial step today, but there's a lot of potential because really that's where we expect a lot of research to go over the next century, really.
Can you talk to me about AI's impact on large molecules?
So large molecules, again, those are the molecules that are like proteins and antibodies. They're big, and you don't write them down as chemical formulas. Usually they're injected. But here's where it gets really interesting, because proteins are really just made up of amino acids. And if you want to have a protein that does a certain thing, you just need to figure out which amino acids you need to put together. It starts sounding a little bit like image generation. I want an image of Stanford, let's say, and what we might look like back at Stanford now in this year. An AI model can go do that for you. You give it some general criteria and it can come up with an image that looks just like that. We can apply those same kinds of models. Many of them are called diffusion models. We can apply those same models to protein design and say, hey, I want a protein that looks like this. But instead of it being pixels that you put together to make an image, you just have amino acids that you put together to make an image.
It's like image generation with amino acids, not pixels. And then you're able to, once you've generated the structure of the protein, you're able to model how it might interact with the rest of the body?
That's right. The first part is to actually figure out what shape it has. And you might be familiar with AlphaFold. You might have heard that from Google DeepMind and the Nobel Prize earlier this year. So that can take a genetic sequence and then figure out what the shape of that is. This is a little bit the reverse, but you still need that kind of an AlphaFold concept where you say, hey, I want an image that looks like this, or I want a protein that looks like this. Give me a genetic sequence. And then you get the genetic sequence, and then you build it out and you say, hey, does it fold like this? And then you start figuring out its other properties where it might interact.
Are you actively using this, or the scientists at Lilly actively using this to model out?
We are using this to start figuring out new protein designs.
Wow. And so tell me about how that process works.
We've got a few different use cases that we're going after. To just put it in a general form, we like to go after hard targets, things that we're not sure that anybody else is going to be able to solve. And so we say, okay, we need a protein that has these kinds of properties. Maybe it has this sort of shape and it's able to fit in this sort of a space or this sort of a pocket so that it can bind with another structure. It could be another protein or a part of another protein. And it needs to have other certain properties. Maybe it's solubility or a certain size that it needs to fit. And so just in the same way you can give an AI model to generate an image, you can give it constraints. You can do the same thing here. And I want my, whatever protein you come up with, it needs to have these certain properties. And then you can turn it away to start generating those proteins and then see what comes out of it. Now, in the end for us, we still always need to test things in the real world. What we call the in silico models, the simulating life in silicon, are never quite good enough. They're getting pretty close, but you still need to test it in a wet lab to make sure that it really matches its predictions.
Are you better able to model whole body human interactions now that we have use of AI, or is it we're still so far off from being able to do that?
I think we're still pretty far off from being able to simulate like an entire human body. One of the things that I've seen for the past couple of years I thought was interesting was I saw one company that was modeling human organs, such as the heart, and being able to model it literally one cell at a time and figure out what happens in the human heart and how does an electrical signal propagate by simulating every single cell. So maybe we're getting up to the level of an organ, but then putting the whole package together of us as humans still seems like a really long time away.
Diogo, let's get into the third area you mentioned, which is how is AI helping develop drugs that are based on small molecules?
So small molecules are also fascinating. These are these molecules that you can write down as a chemical formula. And they're called small because there aren't that many atoms that you put together. But just because it's not very many atoms doesn't mean it's small in terms of the number of possibilities. The number of small molecules that you could come up with is somewhere like on the order of 10 to the 60th or 10 to the 90th power, more than all the galaxies in the universe is the number of different combinations you would have to explore. The hit rate of finding a molecule that actually has medicinal properties that are useful is much, much smaller. Put it this way, finding one good molecule that has medicinal properties would be about as rare as finding one star in the Milky Way. To find that one hit is really hard for a human to do. And so if you're a scientist and you've got 60,000 hours in your working life to go explore molecules, you're not going to take a bet on a random place that nobody's explored if you don't have any reason to believe it's going to be better than anything else, just because the probability of finding something is so, so low. That means that scientists end up clustering around certain areas that have already been proven out. They effectively go to the same galaxy and try to find similar stars. But the real opportunity here with AI is that now you can go explore a lot of these other places that humans would never spend time on just because it's too unlikely to ever be productive. And there isn't enough time in our human lives, even all of our human lives put together, to go explore all of these possibilities. And you instead can have AI go explore these. And I think AI will have some exciting results here, some surprises in places that really no human would have ever made time to go explore. And I think we'll get some novel drugs from surprises out there.
We're only 2.5 years since the release of ChatGPT, but what is the most advanced thing in this research process that Lilly has already? Obviously, you haven't brought something to market. That won't happen for a decade. But where have you seen the biggest specific improvement that you can talk about?
We don't have any AI-developed drugs today. Nobody really does because it takes such a long time. It takes about 10 years to go through the process from the lab all the way to launch. So we're not going to see those medicines for a number of years to come. But we do have some very interesting candidates that we've had. In fact, one of our very first runs of an AI-driven model a couple of years ago, I think this is even before ChatGPT, we were coming up with a medicine and generated something that looked really unique. You didn't have to be a chemist to look at this and just say, hey, this has a really weird looking structure. And we went to our chemists and we said, hey, tell us what's wrong with this. And our chemists looked at it and they said, that's interesting. We never thought of doing it this way. And that was an eye-opening moment for me, which was, it's not just about training the model, it's also about training the human. Yeah. And if AI can open our eyes to other things and help us think about things in a different way than we have before, AI can train us. And then, of course, we can go back and train AI again.
What is the biggest area where people overhype AI in medicine, where people say, AI will solve this, but it's actually just BS?
I don't know that there's anything truly overhyped because I do think that every single area can benefit from AI. Our healthcare system is overwhelmed right now. I think there's a huge opportunity, not just for AI doctors, but for AI nurses. I saw a demo from another really cool company out there that was going after the AI nurse market. And what a cool concept, have an AI nurse collect information from you, collect your family history and do all of that. Imagine what would happen if we could free up all that capacity of nurses so that they could work on more important things.
Are you concerned about how AI makes intellectual property theft perhaps more dangerous?
I love that you asked that. I do think that that's a real threat. We do see copycats coming up. There are companies in various places that specialize in just trying to take a medicine that has been developed and has gone through clinical trials and trying to come up with something that gets around the intellectual property, such as a patent, and being able to make a small change so that they can market it instead. That is a real risk from AI. And when you talk about something like small molecules, again, these are the ones that are small enough to be written as chemical formulas, it's not inconceivable that an AI algorithm can go out and say, I'm going to find a bunch of molecules that are very similar to this one, but I'm just going to make a little change here and there that does not seem to have any effect on safety or efficacy. But it's enough to get around the patent for the molecule. I think that's a real risk for AI because a lot of biotechs invest a lot of time and energy and money into research, and all of that could collapse if the possibility of getting their payout goes away because as soon as their drug comes on market, copycats pop up with similar molecules.
So I'm a copycat. I'm abroad. I see that you've brought a new drug to market. I find out everything that you've patented. I feed it into an AI. I feed in everything I know about it. And I say, hey, help me manufacture something that's just slightly different but has the same effect.
Exactly.
Then all I need to do is manufacture and sell it. And I've undercut you.
Exactly.
So how do you solve that problem?
I don't have an answer yet, but I just know it's something that we need to fix. The cost of bringing medicines to market is enormous. I didn't realize how much it was until I got here. I think the Pharmaceutical Industry Association had put it at $2.6 billion in 2018, I believe. And so now it's got to be well over $3 billion to bring a single medicine to market from the labs all the way through. And we talk about Hollywood movies that are a tenth of that and them being a flop, but the cost of this is insane. If Hollywood knew that they were going to get copycats coming out that had just changed a few things and otherwise were the same movie, they wouldn't be making $300 million movies anymore. And I think we have the exact same risk, but here it's not a loss of your favorite movies and films. It's really a loss of medicines that could really change lives from the innovation that never happens.
Two last questions for you, Diego. So the first one is, tell me something about what medicine will look like in 10 years that will surprise our listeners.
I think in 10 years, we will see more genetic medicine. And my hope is that we will start seeing things that are really more personalized to you and to your needs. At least that's my hope. I think it's crazy that today in 2025, we're still doing medicine much the same way as we did not in 1997, but as like 1955. Take 5 milligrams of this every day for the rest of your life. And it's not really tailored to who I am, what my weight is, how tall I am, or anything else like that, even just basic things like that. And my hope is that over the next 10 years, we're really going to see a rise in medicine that's really targeted at the right dose and the right frequency for you. And I think that'll be a life changer for a lot of us.
Well, that time frame is good because it'll happen when you and I are in our 60s and we start to fall apart physically. So keep working on it, Diego.
We'll need more of it.
Last question I want to ask. What would it take for you to believe that AI is self-aware or sentient?
We're getting close to that. I don't think about that infrequently. In fact, you know what I spent my morning on today? I was cloning myself. I was literally building an AI agent that can replicate me, replicate my thinking, replicate not just my decision-making process, but also my tone, my word choice. And I discovered some surprising things about myself. We call it a mirror. It's something we're developing ourselves, but it's scary to look in the mirror sometimes. Apparently, I spend a lot of time telling people to go faster. So my AI bot wants to just tell everybody to go faster. It's a good idea, Nick. Can you go faster? I get a lot of questions about like what's next in AI. And we had chat bots come along and ChatGPT with that revolution. Right now, we're in the middle of what's called agentic AI. These are agents, and you have multiple agents that can interact with each other. So like my digital twin, my mirror, is interacting with other members of my team, and we see what they come up with. But what happens beyond that? What happens when you don't have just 10 agents interacting with each other, but what happens when you have 1 million agents that are talking and actually are working on some of the world's hardest problems? Imagine having mirrors, twins of our best scientists from all around the world, policymakers and everybody else, and they're actually working on a problem together in silico. I think we have an opportunity ahead to really solve some of the hardest problems this world has ever seen, not just scientific ones, but even social ones.
All right. Well, that is a wonderful note to end on, Diego. It's wonderful to be back in touch. Thank you for coming on this podcast, even if you did bring that slightly embarrassing email with you.
That's right. Next time, we'll have to get together over beer.
That'd be fantastic. I look forward to it, Diego. See you then.
Thanks, Nick.
After the break, I'll be joined by Dan Priest, the Chief AI Officer of PwC. Dan Priest, thanks so much for being here.
My pleasure. Nice to see you, Nick.
So, Dan, we last talked maybe 6 months ago when I interviewed you during season 1. So my first question, what has changed the most or in the most surprising way since we were last together?
We talked about a lot of things that are materializing. The thing that is still hard and we deal with every single day is getting the humans to embrace these proof points. It's surprising to me that we're 6 months later, we have extraordinary proof points that this is real, these AI capabilities and their ability to transform the way we work. And yet we're still dealing with scaling it and getting people willing to change the way they've always done things.
You certainly had success with Eli Lilly, which seems to have changed all kinds of structures in the way that company works. Dan, tell me what stuck out to you from the conversation with Diogo.
It was impressive on a bunch of levels. Diogo is the model for what a CIO and a technologist should be like. Too often you see technologists get disconnected from the business. They get very myopically focused on the technology and they lose sight of the impact that technology is supposed to have. He was so laser focused on the possibilities. I loved the conversation around the general counsel. That was extraordinary. That's my point, is like most organizations are struggling with adoption and scale. They're distracted by the risks. Their general counsel was more focused on the opportunities and had conviction that they could responsibly manage the risks. That's impressive. And then that opened up a door to a whole series of interesting opportunities that they're going after, one after the other.
Diogo talked about cloning himself. Is that something that you advise all your clients to do?
I had an avatar and I used it probably 5 or 6 times at different big meetings that I didn't even show up to. It was the hardest working virtual version of myself I've ever met. It was so convincing that people came up to me a year after and say, "Hey, it's been great. It's great to see you. I think the last time we talked was in San Diego." I wasn't even in San Diego. It's amazing how convincing these digital twins or these virtual versions of ourselves can be now. I don't recommend it. I think the human still has an important value proposition in the relationship, but it is kind of an interesting add to your repertoire of productivity gains.
I mean, it's interesting, right? You can create a clone and then understand more about yourself by interacting with it. And it seems like that's part of what Diogo is doing, like understand how I'm perceived by others, how they see me, and you can learn from it and become a better version of yourself. Once you send it off into the wild, then you have problems like what you mentioned in San Diego, right? It's like having an identical twin, right? People come back to you and they think they've met you and you haven't met them, and there's these sort of unidirectional conversations. It could create a very confusing situation.
It can, but I've seen a lot of people, their twin speaks clearer, at a better pace, more understandably, and they're getting something from seeing that alternate version of themselves work. And so it's just fascinating. And there was some interesting things in the conversation with Diogo about learning from the AI. There's a feedback loop that's happening at this point between the AI agents and the humans.
One of the things Diogo talked about was that Lilly has these truckfuls of data, right? All of the data from the clinical trials, and it's proprietary, and it's incredibly useful. Are there other industries where there are vast troves of data and the folks in the industry haven't quite realized the value of what they have?
Every industry, there are vast troves of data. You're seeing this in retail a lot. AI has been present in contact centers and customer service for a while, but it's exactly as you're pointing out that they've monitored single digits in terms of behavioral indicators around past purchase or things that gives them insight to purchase intent. Now with this generation of AI, you could be managing hundreds of behavioral indicators. The data sets are so big and so complex. The human in that real-time interaction with the customer is not capable of processing that volume of data. The AI agent, though, is detecting frustration in the voice and giving the human agent next best actions to deal with that frustration more effectively. There's so much data that can get harvested to create a better customer experience. I think every single industry has to date suboptimized the data that's available to them. And this gives teams a way to unlock that untapped value.
One of the things we talked about 6 months ago was the era of agents and how quickly it was coming. And you were pretty optimistic that we're moving to an era of agents. Is it coming as quickly as you thought back then? Because some folks would say it's taking a little longer to get here than we expected.
We just did a case study with Wyndham Hotels, and we helped them optimize their contact centers. It's extraordinary what they're able to do. The average handling times of contacts going down by half, 28% of the contacts being handled by agents. We just did a survey of executives, and overwhelmingly, 88% of the survey respondents said they're increasing their investments in agents because of the impact they're having. The proof points are there. It's just the teams and their ability and willingness to scale it and really fundamentally rethink, not just incrementally improve the way they've worked, but to reimagine the operating model. And that's what's special about the Lilly case is they are reimagining the drug discovery process. And it's going to take time to fully appreciate the value of that added capability. But they look and they feel different than most just in terms of their pace of change. They don't let the risk become obstacles.
Tell me about the industry where you've seen the most surprising adoption of AI. I thought this industry will be in the last quartile of companies to really go after this. And instead, they've been aggressive and focused.
It's frankly more of the opposite that I'm seeing.
Tell me about the industry that you thought would really use AI, but that is fighting it the hardest.
Providers.
Mm-hmm.
So in healthcare, you've got payers, providers, and pharma life sciences. And providers are the pointy end of that spear, right? They are delivering the clinical care. They are prescribing those drugs. They're getting people healthy. Providers recognize that they need to change. They're starting to introduce the transcription, but there's so much opportunity there. And a lot of the provider systems are still waiting for others to prove it. They're concerned about replacing clinical care or adding AI to clinical care and potentially changing the role of the clinician. And so there's some complicated factors that they have to work through, like the Lilly example and the OTC. But the benefits are so profound that I would have thought that they would go after it very assertively. That is an industry that will hugely benefit from AI because of personalized medicine, because of efficiencies in care delivery. And there's a prevailing caution around how they do that. And I'm not saying to do it irresponsibly. I'm saying those cautions have very reasonable countermeasures and very good ways they can manage them.
So let me ask you the question I've been asking everybody this season. What would it take for you to believe that AI is self-aware or sentient?
It's happening. I have conversations and it feels very human. I regularly now converse with ChatGPT. I do research. When I go on a walk, I'm having a conversation, and it's starting to feel very human, very sentient. We're not there yet, right? You can feel the gaps when we transition conversations, but it is closer than most people think.
Wait, go back a second. You're going for a walk and you're talking to ChatGPT? Tell me the mechanics. You're like pressing the little microphone button and you're talking to it and then it's responding in audio?
Yeah.
Your last walk with ChatGPT, what did you talk about?
I was asking ChatGPT to tell me about how Eli Lilly has been using AI and what are they known for in the market as it relates to AI. I had a whole conversation for about 20 minutes. I refer to ChatGPT as Chat. Hey, Chat, tell me, how does Eli Lilly compare to their competitors?
Wow.
So just preparing for this, I had a whole conversation with ChatGPT. It's a very human way to understand a topic. And it just gives you a glimpse into where we're headed towards a sentient technology.
Where were you going for this walk?
I have 2 dogs, and I'm one of the few people in the household that take them for those long walks. So I feel obligated.
So you're on a 3-mile walk with your dog, and you're talking to your phone, and you're having this conversation. That's kind of amazing.
It is amazing. It's very natural, right? I drove from Santa Barbara to my home in Orange County, California. And about an hour and a half of that drive, I was talking to ChatGPT about cyber risks, the era of quantum. I'm doing a ton of research at a time when I would have been listening to music, but now it's very proactive, very active learning, and I'm taking advantage of those times in a very human way.
Wow, that's super interesting. Dan Priest, Chief AI Officer at PwC. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks, Nick. Glad to be here.
This has been The Most Interesting Thing in AI. I'm Nicholas Thompson. If you've enjoyed what you've heard, please rate and review this on the podcast platform of your choice. Also, make sure to hit the follow button so you can be alerted about future episodes. Next week, for our last episode of the season, I'll be joined by Kevin Kelly, the co-founder of Wired Magazine and one of Silicon Valley's leading thinkers. He's going to talk about AI optimism and what it means to truly embrace the future of AI. Thanks for listening.